You're listening to the Recovering Methodism Podcast, a global Methodist voice for navigating life and ministry in the 21st century, tackling the issues impacting the church, and recovering the distinctly Methodist practices to participate in the next great awakening. And now your hosts, David Cady and Caleb Spiker.
Well, today we are going to talk a little bit about this Advent season we're in, heading towards Christmas. We're a couple weeks out, right?
That's right.
Right in the middle of the Advent process. And ironically, it's going by very quickly. Packed full of all kinds of stuff.
Flying.
Just every Sunday builds upon the next with all kinds of very good things going on. And yet,
Most Sundays, I look at the bulletin and say, how will we be done in 90 minutes?
well, we aren't. That's the thing. But at least, I don't know. It's just real busy. But that's the irony, because Advent is not about busyness. It's about a slower pace.
Yeah, it's about waiting.
It's about waiting. And as we've said, we don't wait very well at all. And so our big idea
Death,
today...
judgment, heaven, and hell. That's what Advent's about.
Is it really?
The four things that remain.
Is it really?
Historically.
Okay.
Maybe not in America in 2023, but...
Probably not. More like hope, peace, joy, and love.
Well, I mean, if you really want Advent light.
Well, today, as we talk here at this big idea on our podcast, we're going to talk about living slowly in the fast-paced season of Advent. It's very countercultural.
Mm-hmm.
Things are hustling and bustling, and people are getting ready for this season of celebration, and rightly so. It's a lot to celebrate as families gather and church services are held and presents and gifts are exchanged, and there's a lot to celebrate as we do all those cultural things to get ready for the celebration of the birth of Christ.
That's right.
So, Caleb, let's talk a little bit about Advent. Advent means coming, and so we're kind of twofold, celebrating the coming of Christ as a babe, and then also looking ahead to the coming of Christ as the King of Glory. We know that from seminary, and we know that from just our theological background and preparation for ministry.
Well, and we had good Sunday school teachers, so I mean, this isn't something that's new to us.
Not new
right?
to us at all, but it is foreign to the culture in which we live.
Yeah, the Christian Advent is not something that you will find at Costco.
Not at all. We were at Costco yesterday, and I looked at you and I said, we are in Nineveh.
Yes.
Because you had said the day before we were living in Nineveh, and I looked around at Costco and I'm like, you're right here.
Yeah.
Smack dab in central Ohio. We're living in Nineveh. And so what does it mean for us to live slowly in the fast-paced season of Advent? So, Caleb, what ideas do you have about how folks might restore and maintain their sanity and their spiritual health living slowly during this fast-paced season?
Yeah, I think maybe the first and yet hardest thing to do is to learn how to say no. You do not have to go to every Christmas party you're invited to. You do not have to go to every cookie exchange you're invited to. You do not have to participate in the entire show that is the month of December in the late, great American post-capitalist world of 2023.
So a lot of folks, clergy, laity alike, we're wired to be people pleasers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we're social. We like the people we're
And rightly so.
doing
That's
life
not a bad
with.
thing.
Not a bad thing at all. But where it can become problematic is when we stretch ourselves too much and begin to resent the very good things that we're trying to say yes to. So you're suggesting just learning to say no and establish some boundaries. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's crucial because, I mean, how often have we heard grown-ups say, "Oh, I just can't wait for Christmas to be over"?
Very common. I've heard that for 30 years of ministry. I can't wait till I can't wait till it's over.
I mean, how sad is that?
It is. We may have missed the ball, right? Because this is not intended to be a season we rush through just to get it over with, but rather a season in which we slowly walk through, and so we don't miss anything that the Lord has for us during this time. So learning to say no, simplifying, right? Simplifying your schedule and your life through this process, knowing that there will be extra things added on. So let's ask a question here. Even in the midst of all the busyness on a Sunday morning, let's say, let's just limit it to that for a second. We do have to say no to some things just to be able to finish a service in 90 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So, if we're going to have a Christmas cantata, which is 45 minutes, it was wonderful, it's beautiful. We may not have a children's message that day, right? Or we may not.
And we definitely won't have a sermon that day.
No sermon that day.
Not
right?
for long-winded cats like us.
and we may schedule baptisms for another Sunday, right? So just common sense type of things. But sometimes there's a tendency to try to fit everything in.
Yep.
And the reality is we don't have to, and we simplify the process. I always like to use the phrase "less is more," and so if we can simplify the order of a service and model what it means to simplify our lives, I don't know about you, but I looked around Sunday morning and I'm like, I'm seeing God everywhere today. And part of it was I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I was more of a worshiper than a leader.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's very nice. But at the same time, it's also about just being present in a moment and recognizing the presence of the living God in that moment. Yeah. So saying no and simplifying the season isn't eliminating everything, but being able to live slowly in the midst of a fast-paced, jam-packed kind of moment as well.
Yeah.
What about Sabbath? Where does Sabbath play into this?
Yeah, I mean, Sabbath is the church's original practice of simplicity, right? Like it is, it's that decision we make to plant our foot in the ground and say, I'm going to stop today.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to rest. I'm going to worship, and I'm going to delight in what God has given me. We've said this before, right? Like we are not designed for the 24/7 world that we live in.
We're designed to be 24/6 people, right?
That's right.
And finding time intentionally to change the rhythm and pace of life so that we don't forget who we are and whose we are. I had this conversation with one of the confirmation students in the interviews I'm doing with the confirmands. And they talked about Sabbath because they learned about it in their class. And I said, God worked 6 days in creation and created everything that is, including us. In Genesis 1, on the seventh day he rested. And I said, do you think God was tired from that? All that work? And they said, well, no, God doesn't get tired. I said, that's the right answer. I said, what if God, like an artist, in the midst of all the creation, took one day to sit back and say, I'm going to enjoy all that's been created. And maybe that's what the pattern for us is in our life, is we work hard, because hard work is important, right? That's a very Wesleyan concept. But at some point, you have to sit back and delight in the God who allows you to have these things in your life.
Yeah.
So Sabbath is important. Simplifying your life, saying no, is a way to live slowly in the fast-paced season of Advent. Sabbath. We're going to talk a little more about Sabbath in the toolbox later on.
Because I think some of the people who are worst about Sabbathing well are the people in our industry.
No.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
I mean, working on Sunday morning tends to mess with people.
It does. It does. But I'm sure you've heard the joke, Pastor. You only work 1 day a week.
It's true.
Yeah. And I always push back and say, and that's a half day at that.
Yeah, that's right. Half day. I work 1 hour a week. Well, 90 minutes during Advent.
Yeah. Well. So this concept of slow motion living, why is that important? How do we help our congregation embrace that approach, especially during this season? How do we ourselves and our families engage this process of slow motion living? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking over your shoulder at the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden.
John Wooden, Coach Wooden.
Because, the Pyramid of Success is on my wall because it is, let's see here, what would Herman call it? He'd say, it's extra biblical.
It is extra biblical.
But that doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's accurate. That's accurate.
And one of the things that John Wooden said was, we should be quick, but we should never hurry. And that is absolutely true on the basketball court, and I think it's also absolutely true in our lives. If we are living in a state of hurry, we are going to miss all the good things that God has for us. If we are living in a state of hurry, we will find ourselves sick from it. I mean, like literally sick from it. There's been medical studies that hurry brings about illness. And that, when we look at the life of Jesus, he's unhurried. I think, was it Dallas Willard that when asked, describe Jesus in a word, he said, unhurried.
Unhurried. So since you mentioned Coach Wooden and this concept of being quick but not hurrying, you took me back to my younger days playing basketball. I lived and breathed the game of basketball for probably 15 years. And my experience in that arena was that when I hurried, when I was rushed, whether it was ball handling or passing or shooting, when I hurried, I made mistakes. Mm-hmm. Right? I didn't have success. And I think the same is true in ministry. I think the same is true in life. When we hurry, not only it leads to sickness, but we make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Right? We're not our best selves when we do that, when we hurry. So what would you say to a pastor who's like, I don't have time to live an unhurried life. I've got hospital calls to make. I've got Bible studies to lead, services to prepare for. And it's just a season. I'm just going to do this for a season, right? I don't have time to live an unhurried life. What do you say?
I'd say really what you don't have time for is all those TikTok videos that you watch when you are exhausted. Because I think this is part of it, is that we've gotten used to this rhythm where we go, and then we give into sloth. And we will binge, 8 episodes on Netflix, or we will doom scroll through Instagram or whatever. When the biblical model is to rest, an actual rest, like as Americans, we're very good at sloth and very bad at rest. So, to the pastor who would make the audacious claim that they are too busy for resting and too busy for going slow, I guess my first question is, are you truly too busy, or are you trifling away time because you aren't living with good rhythms?
It's a great question to think about and to ask ourselves. Bottom line is, when we get into that place when we say, I can't afford to live slowly, I can't afford to live an unhurried life, the response is really, you can't afford not to.
That's right.
You got it. Your family, your church, They need you for the long haul here, right? So slow down a little bit and realize that you're not the savior of the world. No, we're anticipating him.
Yeah, that's right.
Back to Advent, right? So the book you're going to share with us in just a moment as we get to Caleb's library is really about dealing with this in a very practical way. So anything else about the big idea today we want to touch base on before we make our transition?
I mean, I think, we should always remember that biblical wisdom from the story of Elijah. When you're stressed out, take a nap and eat a donut.
Oh, I love 1 Kings 19. Love 1 Kings 19. A nap and a donut. It's the answer to a lot of problems. Just, God shows up in those moments. So that's awesome. I love it. Well, maybe we'll do that on a podcast at another time. But let's transition to the library. We're going to pull a book off of Caleb's library and talk a little bit about that.
Sounds good.
And now it's time for Caleb's library.
All right, we're back for Caleb's library. One of my favorite parts of our podcast, we pick a book off of the bookshelf that Caleb wants to talk about, and he's read or at least perused, and give us an idea of some of the content. And today's
Perused. I don't Beeson read any of these books.
Oh, come
on now.
I know you better than this.
These are books that I have now. They may be books that the second time through I'm just going back and seeing where I underlined things. But these are all books that have been truly read at one point or another.
I want to take offense at the comment Beeson read, but at the same time,
I stand by my words.
I know it's true statement, so I can't defend it. I'm very proud of my Beeson reading.
And you should be.
Yeah, well, one day we'll just do a little segment on how to Beeson read a book, and I'll take you to school. So we want to take a look at a book that Caleb has devoured, book by John Mark Comer, and the title of this book is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yeah.
What year did this come out? A couple years ago, maybe?
Yeah, 17, 18, I think, something like that.
So about 5-6 years ago. And John Mark pastors in
Portland.
He's
one of those Portland pretty boy pastors that I'm very insecure about.
Because of Cindy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sounds like another segment all by itself. But
this is a growing theme, right?
It's coming across. It's okay. So you've read this book a couple times, once, twice, 3 times a lady. What happened? I mean, where are you at with this?
So I read this book for the first time as a bit of homework. My friend Kathy was concerned about the pace that Cindy and I were living at, and had a little intervention and said, "Hey, you're going on vacation. You should read this book." So we read it on vacation.
Now, it should be said, though, that this particular book and title has its roots traced back to John Ortberg, who has his roots traced and tied back to Dallas Willard.
Yeah, this is an inheritance.
Yeah.
What Willard poured into Ortberg poured into Comer, and Comer has put pen to paper.
Gotcha. So give us the 30,000-foot view with maybe some swoops down to some details. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. The subtitle, at least on my book, is my copy is How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of a Modern World.
Yeah. So at the very center of this book is the conviction that the solution to an overbusy life is not more time. It's to slow down and simplify your life and prioritize those things that matter.
Okay.
So he talks about, screen usage and time management and having a good work-rest balance, good work-home balance. Talks about Sabbath. And, one of the things he says is that we need to remember that what we give our attention to is who we become. Because the mind is the portal to the soul. And what we fill our mind with, that will shape the trajectory of our characters. So in the end, our life is no more than the sum of what we gave our attention to.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm concerned a little bit about swinging the pendulum the other way, and this elimination of hurry becoming slothful, right? Because I grew up with this understanding of a Wesleyan approach to money, so to speak, and earn all you can,
Yep.
right? Which lifts up the value of a good, solid work ethic. So how do we find balance in having a good work ethic? Because hard work is very important, and hard work pays off in the end. Because I like to say, as I like to tell my kids, easy don't pay the rent. Right? Easy don't pay the rent. And so you're going to have to work hard at this. Whatever you put your time and effort into, work hard at it. Because the first step of, at least from a Wesleyan perspective on money, is earn all you can. But we know in our modern Western culture, that leads to overwork and it leads to burnout. And even in ministry, well, maybe even say especially in ministry, it can lead to very difficult circumstances where we want to quit because we're burned out and over our head.
Yeah, and I think this is the secret sauce, right? That one, we hit a point of diminishing returns in our work.
Yes.
Right. Like, and that number has a little bit of fluctuation in it, right? Like there's some people who can put in a solid 35, others can put in a solid 50, a very small minority can go up over 60. But even if you are putting in a solid 60, that means you are still awake for another 65 hours a week.
Right.
And how are you spending it?
There you go.
Because, no one's working 120 hours a week. Not well.
No, not at all.
I mean, if you are at work 120 hours a week, I guarantee you're spending a lot of time doom scrolling at work.
Fair enough.
You are goofing off. You're doing other things because we can't stay focused that long. So for Comer, I think a big piece of this is how are we spending those moments that we are not that we're not engaged in work? Are we deepening our apprenticeship to Jesus? Are we investing in our family? Are we resting?
Right.
Or are we mindlessly consuming the glitzy,
Right.
fast-paced stuff around us that sucks in our attention and gives us nothing in return?
So one of the things, one of the quotes from the book that I appreciate is that Comer says that hurry is violence of the soul, right? Or violence on the soul, meaning it's harmful.
Yeah.
Right? So if we find ourselves living a hurried pace, and I realize that may come and go. We may have a very rushed afternoon, but this is about lifestyle. This isn't about a segment of our day where we got to get somewhere. Right? This is about a pattern, a rhythm to life that is hurried and rushed all the time, frantic all the time.
Yeah.
Which you can't sustain that, and you shouldn't. You're not intended to sustain it. He calls it violence on the soul. What do you make of that? How have you seen this? Have you experienced it? What would be your response to a quote like that?
Yeah, I know for me, if I have not done a good job resting, my default will become sloth. If I have not been intentional about the time that I am away from the dutiful things of my life, I am not going to be engaged when those time comes. I'll be distracted and, finding other things to get me off course. But that intentional decision to rest well makes it so that when I am working, I can actually focus.
Okay.
Because I'm not exhausted from work the day before, and then instead of recharging and being re-energized, I just went to the the placebo of the masses, or not the placebo of the masses. What's the Marx quote? The opiate of the masses. Yeah. Which, in our case, the opiate of the masses is this phone in our hands.
This device.
Because it can make it so that we don't have to engage with anything. Well, we can be entertained to death.
I see this, especially with some of the younger people that I'm around. I try to have conversation, at a restaurant with a younger group that we're hanging out with, and they're glued to a cell phone. Like, put it away, and let's talk. Let's have a conversation.
So there's some fascinating research that we'll have to go back and do this book. It was what is her name? I have it written down. And she researches attention span in conversations, and she said that the way college students interact today is, it's a different language from what people were speaking 20 years ago.
100%.
Because now, everyone knows how to do it, right? Like, you're engaged, like you have a text conversation going on with the people who you're talking to simultaneously.
Correct.
Making the comments that you're not allowed to make out loud.
Correct.
And so, 3 people have to be engaged at all times. And when someone goes down, it's like, okay, it's my turn to come up and be engaged. And you never get to any real depth because you are always just in and out. Like, you never spend enough time in the conversation to get deep into it. You have to come back up for water, or for air, which in this case is the phone. And it's fascinating. And Comer is while riffing off of Willard and Ortberg, he's also riffing off of Andy Crouch and the work he did in TechWise Family, which is riffing off this lady from I really wish I could remember her name right now.
Well, Comer kind of alludes to some of this when he says that the modern world is a virtual conspiracy against the interior life.
Yeah, buddy.
A virtual conspiracy against the interior life. And it affects our prayer life. It affects our thought life. It affects our ability to engage one another in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
And have conversations that are substantial, have substance to it. Mm-hmm. So anything else from Comer's book that you would want to highlight for us today?
So I think here, especially now that we're in Advent, Comer has another quote that I really like where he says, "Love, joy, and peace are at the heart of all Jesus is trying to grow in the soil of your life, and all 3 are incompatible with hurry." Love, joy, and peace cannot grow in the presence of hurry.
I like it. We have to cultivate the kind of environment in our lives that produce these they're the fruit of the Spirit, really. And a fast-paced life, or fast-paced rhythm to our life, is not an environment where the fruit of the Spirit can grow and thrive.
Yeah. And that's why Corrie ten Boom said that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, recommend the book?
Yes. Yep. Not as highly as, On the Incarnation.
Of course not. Athanasius has a little more weight to him than John Mark Comer.
Yeah.
Is it a quick read?
Yeah.
That was a trick question. It's about eliminating hurry. But it's a quick read.
Yeah. It's Like he's not challenging you with, dense theological topics here. It's, I mean, and it's one of those books that as you read it, there's nothing that's like, that's surprising. I mean, it's all just kind of like, well, yeah, of course that's true.
Sure.
Of course that's true.
Is this one of those books where you can maybe read a chapter and then go practice it for a week and come back and take a concept, well, maybe not just a chapter, but take a concept and implement it in a real practical way? And
yeah. Oh, definitely. And for Cindy and I, because on this vacation we both took a book. We read our books, then we read each other's books. And so she took Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Ward, and I took this, and then we flipped them. And it led to some really meaningful conversations on hikes on that vacation that came back and changed the way that we ordered, the life of our household. So I mean, I have fond feelings towards it, even though it's a Portlandia pretty boy pastor, because it has brought a less hurried pace to the life of our family. I mean, this book, as well as some other books in this vein, is, why we don't have Wi-Fi.
Understand.
Right? Because ultimately, we don't think it's going to increase the joy of our household.
I got you. So the book, once again, is entitled
The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate the few moments in your library.
Now for some practical wisdom for church leaders. Let's open up the pastor's toolbox.
Well, in every podcast, we talk about the tools in the life of ministry, and I think today is one of the most undervalued tools, but one that is absolutely critical to having any sort of endurance in the ministerial life, and that is Sabbath.
Sabbath.
So Dave, Sabbath. Why would a pastor need Sabbath? I mean, they only work one day a week.
Yeah, that's the old joke, isn't it? I hear it all the time. I heard it for 30 years. Pastor, you only work one day a week. And I always say, and a half day at that.
That's right.
I'm done by noon. So, why do we need Sabbath? And
Well, I mean, I think it starts with let's just take a quick biblical survey of Sabbath, right? Over 6 days, God created sun, moon, stars, sky, water, animals, plants, humans. Good. Very good. Seventh day, God rests. And he does not call the Sabbath good. He calls the Sabbath holy. Holy. Going forward a little bit. Moses on Mount Sinai getting the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make graven images. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. And then 2 paragraphs on keeping the Sabbath.
It's the number 4 commandment.
It's the number 4 commandment, and it's a third of the text that is the 10 Commandments.
Sure, it's a big deal.
Huge.
If the 10 Commandments were in a playoff system, the Sabbath would be the 4th one in, right? Is that what you're saying? Is that too soon? I'm sorry.
It would be like 2014, where it's the 4th one in, but it's going to win.
I know. I brought up the playoffs because I know it's.
We aren't going there.
It's a little soon for you.
It's
I know.
Way too soon.
So the point being, there's a huge emphasis, Old Testament, New Testament, throughout the biblical narrative, on the importance of Sabbath keeping.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could make the argument that Sabbath was the spiritual discipline that enlivened the church for the majority of its history.
Well, yes, right? Because it establishes the pattern for living.
That's right.
It establishes a rhythm that provides balance to life and keeps God at the center, right?
Yep.
Because if we don't observe that rhythmic pattern for living, work, rest, it's easy to put ourselves at the center or something else. But God is no longer at the center of life. So Sabbath keeping is very, very important in any Christ follower's life. But this particular toolbox segment is about being in ministry and practicing Sabbath. Seems to be fair to say that that's vitally important to the minister, right? To the pastor of a church, to someone in spiritual leadership, to have balance and a rhythm to life it feeds the soul. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I think the data bears it out, right? That pastors who fail to have a regular Sabbath practice burn out quicker than those who do.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So
and I would make the argument, chances are their ministry kind of sucks before they burn out too.
It's always possible. If they're running on fumes, spiritually speaking, it would make sense that it would may not be as productive as it could have been. We'll say it that way.
That's more gracious than it is fair. But
I'm always going to try to err on the side of grace if possible. So that's an old David McCann book from president of Asbury Seminary that I read many, many years ago. Maybe I'll pull that one off the shelf as well. I always try to err on the side of grace, Caleb. So what's your Sabbath keeping process look like for the Caleb Spiker world?
Yeah, since Sunday mornings tend to be filled with work. For our family, Sabbath begins on Friday night. We typically, I don't want to give off the impression that we are perfect here, because there are plenty of times that we just, we fail to live with the sort of intentionality that we know we should. But when we are doing well, our Sabbath practice begins on Friday night. We have breakfast for dinner. Light a couple candles, pray together. Typically after dinner, we'll play a board game, go to bed, and the instruction is simple: sleep in.
Oh, it's a good instruction.
Because, and one of the things we say on that Friday night that begins our Sabbath is we say, we are starting it in the evening, and because this 8 to 10 hours that we're going to spend in bed is an important part of what God is doing on our Sabbath. I think, I think it's easy if we get into Sunday's the Sabbath, to miss out on that, that rest time, like that you can build into the very practice, the necessity of rest, when you start it the night before, the way God intended.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
So our Friday night, we have breakfast for dinner. We play board games. We sleep in on Saturday morning. Saturday morning is the only time for sugary cereal in our household, because it is a time of delight and celebration. And then, if we've played our cards right, and we aren't getting that sugary cereal till 10:30 or 11 in the morning, we can go fishing in the afternoon, go hike in the afternoon, play other games, go sledding, whatever, and then typically we'll have dinner together again, and then typically it's an early dinner, and then we are getting ready for Sunday morning.
Nice.
which, looks different from the other 4 members in my household than it does for me.
Well, sure it does.
But
So it's a different rhythm to life. It has opportunities for delight. In your case, sugary cereal. I like that. And it's relationship oriented with family. Mm-hmm. It's good, especially at the age of your boys are right now. That's good.
Yep.
Okay. For me, it's a little different. Our kids are grown, although they're close in proximity to us, and still young enough that we can still do things together. And so my Sabbath often begins Thursday night and goes into Friday. But same concept, Thursday nights, for me personally, sundown. When I get home from work, whatever time that is, 5, 6 o'clock, whatever, on Thursday night, there's a great satisfaction in my soul, right? I have always had a pretty strong work ethic, and so I go hard Sunday through Thursday. And for me, ministry is one of those things. I had a friend many years ago. He's no longer in ministry. He's a great pastor, but he just said, I want to go back to the family business, which was a electrical business here in Columbus. He got burned out at the local church level. But anyway, he used to say, I like mowing grass because I can tell what's done and what still needs to be done. And that always resonated with me because ministry isn't always like that. Ministry is kind of
never like that.
It's never like that, right? You're like, okay, well, we got as far as we can get this week, and then we had, coming up next week, got some other things we're going to tackle. But there's a satisfaction to get to that day of the week. You're like, okay, I've worked hard all week. I've done as much as I think I can do. Visitations, sermon prep, teaching, been full days, and on Thursday night, tomorrow, I don't have to do anything. And I can hike. I can have one of the kids, and we can travel to Southern Ohio and hike. I think we have a tradition we started a couple of years ago in December. We go. There's a hike in Fairfield County. What's that called? Christmas Mound or something like that. It's kind of a metro park, and we go hike it in late December, right before Christmas. It's our Christmas hike. Yeah. So. But it's a matter of just, again, different pace, different activities that provide refreshment and rest. Yeah. And I look forward to that. And it gives me a chance to delight in God's presence in a different way than I do when I'm at the church. And I don't want it to make it sound like the Sunday through Thursday is, 90 miles an hour with my hair on fire, whatever hair is left. But but it's a different pace. It's a different type of time with God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I know for us, a big part of it is how we unplug from the stuff we do the rest of the week. So, I mean, there's literally an unplugging, right? Like, we do our best to keep our phones off and in a drawer somewhere.
Right.
Because, with the phone in your pocket, you are on call 24/7.
Sure.
You can always open up that document and perfect it just a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely.
You can always send another email. You can always
got it.
Send one more pastoral care text. So, one of the things that Dan Gildner, who's done quite a bit of research on this, he likes to say is that Sabbath is one of the ways, especially for people in our line of work, it's one of the ways that we can believe the gospel. Because I am giving the church to God for a day and trusting that he's not going to burn it down.
Well, I understand that.
Right. That I can step away, I can give God his church back, and nothing is going to happen that is going to...
I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way, because, I don't think Sunday through Thursday that I'm in charge, because I'm not giving anything back to God. Here's the thing with me, though, is letting others step in and lead, whether it's staff or laypersons, and saying, you'll be fine. I don't have to be there. Yeah. And I'll tell you, there was a time in my life, in my ministry, when I felt extremely guilty taking time off, right? Because I felt like it all depended on me. And now if there's an event on a Friday and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't be there on Friday. And if I get grief about it, I'm to the place in my life where I'm like, well, sorry.
I can't be there on Friday.
I can't be there on Friday. Now, if it's a funeral, that's a different conversation, right? But if it's something else that someone else can step in and lead, you all don't need me here on Friday. And so I just want to talk real quickly for those of us who may struggle with guilt over taking vacation or taking time off. My advice to my younger self would be, dude, get over it.
Yep.
Right? You're going to be, you're not that important, first of all, but you're going to be more important to your people if you're healthy. Mm-hmm. If you're well rested, if you've spent time with the Lord, if you're enjoying life to a deeper degree. So, that's right. My advice to anyone out there who struggles with that is, got to get past that. Use your vacation. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't go anywhere, use your vacation. Take your time off, and practice Sabbath as a discipline in your life that models it for others.
Yeah, as Granddaddy Hanover used to say, take your vacation, because either the person who comes in and preaches for you will be a blessing and they'll bless your people, or they'll stink it up and they'll be more glad when you come back.
That's a true story. That is so true. I can't even tell you how true that is.
It is a win-win to take your vacation time.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking out the window, and there's a guy walking his dog, and it's a beautiful Australian Shepherd, Merle Australian Shepherd. And I would love just to go meet them, but I'm not going to do that right now. I want to read this quote from, going back to John Mark Comer. An easy life isn't an option. An easy yoke is.
Ooh.
An easy life isn't an option. Life's hard.
Yep.
Right? You got bills to pay, and if you're a homeowner, things to take care of, right? You got to make sure your yard's mowed, leaves are cleaned up, and repairs are made, so on and so forth. Easy life isn't an option, but an easy yoke is. And that easy yoke is our relationship with Jesus. I mean, that's his invitation. Come to me, or you are weary and burdened. That old language, heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So I'd say to folks out there listening, if you have other thoughts and ideas or other ways you implement Sabbath in your life, we'd love to hear from you. Caleb, what's the email address?
recoveringmethodism@gmail.com.
Yeah, reach out to us and let us know how you do Sabbath. Let us know if you have questions about the practice of Sabbath.
If you're looking for a resource on Sabbath, Dr. Matthew Sleeth's 24/6 is great. There's also, there have been so many books written on the Sabbath, mostly in the Jewish tradition. It's like Rabbi Joshua Herschel, that's kind of the seminal work. But there was a woman. She was a editorial writer for the New York Times. I think Julia Schiller or something.
Yeah, Tim Keller quotes her a lot.
So here is for all intents and purposes, a secular Jewish woman who later in life refound the beauty of Sabbath.
Yeah.
And she is one of the most winsome, engaging writers I've ever read. Like she writes exceptionally well.
Right.
It's one of those books that you read and it's just like, oh gosh, I wish I could write sentences like this. This this is next level. But, I mean, for the pastor trying to figure out how to make Sabbath work in their life and in their ministry, Sleeth 24/6 is probably the place to start.
That's
if you want to read a book.
That's a good one.
But really, you don't even need to read a book. You just need to do it. You just need to commit to it. And it's hard. And you really should make sure your family's on board, because they will put the holes in the boat.
Well, sure.
If they aren't.
But you got to protect it.
You got to protect it.
And I want to circle back to that random comment I made about 3 minutes ago about this dog out here in the churchyard. I'm sitting here watching this guy play Frisbee with his beautiful Australian Shepherd, Blue Merle Australian, and he is delighting in this relationship with his dog as he tosses the Frisbee to him or her, whatever the animal is. And I want to go meet him. I just want to go and say, dude, you're welcome to play in this yard, because this dog is fun to watch, and he's out there laughing with this dog. And I don't know who he is, but just this picture of momentary contentment. And it's not even 3 o'clock in the afternoon on what is today? Tuesday. And he's enjoying the sunshine, throwing a Frisbee with his dog as we talk about Sabbath. And so I'm going to get off this microphone and walk out and say hi to this guy, and just say, you can love your dog, and go introduce myself to him.
He gone.
See
you, Dave.
See ya.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the podcast today. Again, if you have any comments or ideas for the toolbox, or books that you think we should read and review, please email us at recoveringmethodism@gmail.com. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Recovering Methodism podcast. We hope your heart has been strangely warmed. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and leave a 5-star review. God bless.